Hey everyone, today we're going to be going over the recommended deck list for the Great Moth raid. Right, so, you might be thinking, hey, are you just having a joke at the moment having Elemental Hero Neos as your ace monster? A bit. To be honest, he's actually decent. He's one of two ace monsters I would have, and I'm going to go over each one, because depending on what your deck is like, you may want to have either one of these as ace monsters, or something else. We'll get into that. But anyway, anti-object is a big thing in this raid. You're going to have to destroy these cocoons with, like 20 health objects. You're going to have to destroy the main cocoon in the middle, which has like 40-something, object health at the higher levels. Right, you're going to want to have basically almost every single anti-object you have in. Now, also take into account all the special monsters for this raid. There are a number of monsters that are going to get a bonus to the number of anti-objects they have. Those are, Multi-Strike Dragius, I think Trickstar Holy Angel, Junk Synchron, Backup Secretary, Sports Dragon Slugger, a lot of these super rares. You'll see the list in the boss thing. I have them all in this deck, so you're going to want to have all those in kind of regardless of how many slots you have on your monsters, because they will definitely help out a lot. And then basically any monster you have that has at least 2 slots, really. If you have 3, that is also really good, but even if they just have 2, I would definitely put them in. I haven't included some of them in my deck because I've run out of space. The ones at Super Rare have with just 1 slot are just not worth having in, including the Ultra Rare one. But you're going to want to have them all in. As many good ones as you can have in. Now this is where the ace comes into play, because we have Trickstar Holy Angel and Elemental Hero Neos in this deck. Now the reason why I have Neos is because once you hatch the boss's cocoon, the boss buster, essentially the weak points become available and you can do massive damage to him. However, this raid has a feature where once you destroy the cocoons on the side lanes, it will actually give you a really, really good monster, like a boss buster monster, to attack the middle. So in that case, you really don't, if you can actually destroy these side cocoons consistently, you don't need a monster, you don't need a boss buster monster in the deck. And to be honest, in the earlier levels, you probably don't need Neos in this deck, because at the earlier levels, it's a lot easier to destroy these cocoons. It's only when you get up to the last couple levels that they actually become very difficult to destroy. And that's ultimately why I have Neos in this deck. Neos is in here because if I fail to destroy those cocoons at the side, he is my backup plan. He is my, here, I'm going to do 4,500 damage times 2 to you, to the boss. If you do manage to destroy the cocoons, the Great Moth cards that you get have 2,600 attack and then 3 boss buster slots on there. Not only that, but they can be summoned without a sacrifice. So they're going to go up to 5,600 times 2. So 11,200 damage compared to the 9,000 that you would do with Neos. So very, very powerful, definitely worth it. And so ultimately, I think this is going to come down to a preference, your preference with your deck. How many cards do you have in that have anti-object? If you have in a lot of monsters that do not have, anti-objects, or too many slots for anti-objects, I would have Trickstar Holy Angel as your ace. At the very least, if it has the raid skill unlocked, which means it will constantly come back to your hand, because it has a bonus +3 in this raid, which means currently this one at 3 slots is going to have a 5 anti-object boost, which means it's going to do 6 damage to objects. Even if you only have 1 slot, it's going to do 3 damage to objects and constantly come back to your hand, which means you can sacrifice your weaker anti-object monsters to continuously put this out. The one issue with Trickstar Holy Angel is once, after 3 turns, once the cocoon hatches and the Great Moth raid monster comes out, or raid boss, it changes the monster with the lowest defense on the field into a cocoon at the start of the battle phase. And at that point, Trickstar Holy Angel kind of becomes a bit useless. You can give it defense boost, but it's only going to get 200, maybe 400. It's still going to be hit by this ability. So Trickstar Holy Angel is absolutely fantastic in those first 3 turns. After that, it is a bit useless. But still, again, if you are struggling for like having good like anti-object monsters, put Trickstar as your ace. Make sure to use all of your worst monsters at the beginning and sacrifice them for Trickstar. And then once the cocoon hatches, then you can start using all of your better anti-object monsters. If you are not having trouble destroying those objects without drawing Trickstar Holy Angel, then I would just put Elemental Hero Neos as your ace, as it will just become your backup for if you do not manage to destroy those cocoons. Right, other cards we have in. Leviathan Dragon. This one we basically have in purely because of its raid skill, which gives everything an 1000 tap point boost. This card is easily going to be caught out by the boss's skill and get turned into a cocoon, so this card is pointless to have in unless you have the raid skill unlocked. Another good one to have in is Stardust Dragon, again with its raid skill, because it's going to give everything 1000. So if you have in Stardust, especially if you have it in where it basically brings itself back, so you have like a 3 slot Stardust, that one is very, very good to have in as well. You might even want to consider Black Rose if you have Black Rose's raid skill, but I think Leviathan Dragon is good enough, and it's only a 1 sacrifice, and you get, you know, all of this as well. So yeah, that's why we have that in. We have Multi-Strike Dragius in because it has a +3 to its anti-object. I don't have the raid skill unlocked, but if I did have that unlocked, I would probably put that on instead of one of the anti-objects. Though, generally in playing, it wasn't too. It was definitely would have been useful in 1 or 2 matches that I had to have that skill on, where I could just summon it without sacrifice that raid skill. Apart from that, I have in Dark Resonator Performer Hip Hippo. This is mainly to get out Multi-Strike Dragius and also to use for Elemental Hero Neos. I think they're worth having in anyway, but you can determine that. Hip Hippo's good because it has Assist Heal. Dark Resonator, if you do lose a card, you can send this down the middle, and at the very least it's going to do 3,300 times 2. However, and we have in one of our best Assist Heal monsters as well. Depending on how long it is taking you to get this boss down, to actually defeat this boss, if the amount of damage the boss is doing is taking its toll on you, I would maybe consider swapping out Dark Resonator for like another Assist Heal monster, and hopefully, you know, pushing that down the lane and getting in that Assist Heal when you need it. The only spell cards we have in are Gravity Axe Growl, which basically adds ×2 anti-object to a monster, which can be very useful for you or your ally. If you may not necessarily need this, but you might go, my ally is you know, not quite going to be able to destroy their cocoon and it's going to hatch, but if I use this Gravity Axe Growl on one of their monsters, they'll be able to beat it. And that can be, you know, that can be a massive swing if, you know, if you do or don't manage to destroy these cocoons. And the other one is Rod of Silence. This one is in, again, because the boss does so much damage. This one is in just to basically get that extra bit of health to survive the boss's attack. Now, if you're looking for other cards that might be useful to have in, there's nothing that we can really do to survive the boss's transformation, like transforming our allies into cocoons, but we can put in cards to help defend against the boss slowing down our monsters. So Chivalry is also a card that you might want to consider putting in. The trap card is also very good to have in because this one will just help against the trap the boss has that slows down your level 2 or lower, you know, monsters. So if if you're sort of lacking for slots, this one might also be one that you want to consider putting in the deck. And there we have it. That is the deck list for the raid. I usually do try and go for a lower down deck for these raids, like for people who maybe don't have as many slots or cards as these. If we're going to do that for this one, again, it would likely be a lot of the same monsters, just with 2 slots rather than 3 slots, right? And if you don't have like any of these super rare monsters, then I would just use any other anti-object monster that you have. There are a couple of ones, you know, as you can see, that I haven't put in. So, for example, if you don't have Seventh Road or Backup Secretary or Junk Synchron, you can put in another Ajama, you can put in Trap Tricks, anything just to bolster those anti-object monsters of yours. However, you know, it is definitely important to have these in because these do get bonuses. These super rares do get, I think, a ×2 bonus to the anti-objects. So, you know, even if you only have one of them, you might get the same effect out of having, say, a free slot Ojama Green or rare monster. Just replace them with your best anti-object monsters. That's the key here. Just having your absolute best anti-object monsters. But bear in mind, some monsters do get a bonus. You can check that out on the raid page. Same with Dragius. If you don't have Dragius, again, just or Trickstar Holy Angel, again, just put in your best anti-object monsters. These cards are definitely not needed. They help, but they're not needed. And in fact, I don't even use these in the final duel, which you'll see coming up. I just don't draw them. So you'll see the boss is perfectly beatable without them. Leviathan Dragon, again, helps a lot because it will add an additional 8,000 damage on the turn you summon it. That will be dealt to the boss. But again, is not absolutely needed. And if you're looking for something to replace with Leviathan Dragon with, and you don't have any of the cards that I mentioned previously in the video, I would just put in either your best Boss Buster monster, or if you're lacking healing or object destruction, put in one of those. Anyway, that is the deck. Let's get on to the duel. So, I actually quite like this new raid compared to the last couple raids we've been having. This one's a lot tougher, but at the same time, it does mean it's a lot more difficult for new players or players that don't have a lot of slots on their cards. So we start off with 2 cocoons, one on each side, one in the middle, one on the side. And thankfully, we've actually gotten the spell card that all it does is just increase the count by 1. This is actually one of the better ones we can get because some of the traps that Weevil does can halt our progress into attacking these cocoons, as you might see on later turns. But for now, we're just placing 2 monsters down, 1 in each lane, to do as much damage to these cocoons as possible. If the one on the right hatches, so if we don't basically beat it in 2 turns, it will summon a Great Moth with 2,500 attack to attack one of me or the person on my left down the lane. If we do manage to beat it though, we will both get a monster which has a Great Moth which has 2,600 attack, we can summon without a sacrifice, and has Boss Buster ×3. So a very, very useful card for doing damage to Great Moth once it hatches. So we really, really do want to destroy the side ones. Still, we also want to do as much damage as we can to the middle, because depending on the amount of damage that we do to it in 3 turns will depend on how many weak point positions it has. So we've always just put down Infinite Dismissal, which is really bad for us because it means any level 2 or lower monster we get is going to get slowed down, which means it's going to take 2 turns to get there. That means I can't actually hit the one on the left, but I can hit the one in the middle because we do have 2 more turns to actually hit to destroy the egg in the middle. But thankfully my ally was able to put down a level 4 monster to go for that cocoon. So this is one thing to remember going into this battle, is if you do have a high level monster, a level 3 or level 4 monster, maybe keep it in your hand for attacking the cocoon on turns like these. Obviously, if you have Trickstar Holy Angel in your first hand, that's just really great. And you can actually do a lot of damage to the cocoon. Now, I have opted, as I might have mentioned in the deck discussion, I've opted for having Neos in my first hand. But if you do have a good Trickstar with a lot of slots, and you are struggling to take out the cocoon, that might be a good card to have as your ace. So now we've unfortunately gotten the Infinite Dismissal again, which means all of our level 2 and lower monsters are going to be slowed down. And also our highest attack position monster is also not going to be hit.
We're moving to the battle phase. I activate a trap card. I activate my trap. Infinite Dismissal. Oh no! Be careful. They're starting to move. That didn't even leave a scratch. That didn't even leave a scratch. I'm counting down your doom. skill. You'll learn that your chances to win are less than 0. Behold,
So we've actually managed to get the egg down to 0, which means when it hatches now, it will have a weak spot for all players. If it only has a weak spot for 3 players, it's not the end of the world. You can still manage to defeat it, but it might be just a little bit tougher.
it's the main phase of the 4th turn.
And notice also that it will now start doing 2,500 damage a turn. Right. So I wanted to show this duel in particular because I make a mistake on this turn. Notice the boss has put down Infinite Dismissal, which slows down our lower level monsters, but also the other trap card there, which will basically negate all of the abilities for your highest attack monster. What I was thinking of doing here was putting down Neos in the right lane so that we could actually destroy the cocoon. I was kind of hoping that my ally was going to put something down and we'd be able to... that would actually get there and we'd be able to kill it. So my ally did put something down, but it is a level 1 monster, so it is going to get slowed down and that cocoon is going to hatch, unfortunately. I wanted to show this because this is a mistake I made. And what I should have put down was Neos. Yes, Neos would have fallen into the Raid Monster's trap. It would have had all of its skills negated. It wouldn't have come back. But the cocoon would have been destroyed this turn. Both me and Duel 3 would have gotten a Great Moth to use. And we wouldn't have gotten a 2,500 monster that's going to come to one of us on the next turn. So I wanted to point out this mistake. I was keeping Neos because I was hoping, oh yes, I can use it on future turns to do damage to the Great Moth. But I think in this case, the best thing to do would have been just to sacrifice Neos in order to destroy the cocoon and gotten 2 of us, you know, a Great Moth monster, which would have done far more damage than just me playing Neos over and over again. And this is the conclusion I think I would have come to had I had more time, but just kind of ran out of time there.
Are you okay? This card's not good enough to win. Oh, it's your turn by acting. It's the main phase of the 5th turn. They're wide open for attack. Strike 'em hard. Tricky summon. Nice play.
So now we're putting Neos in the middle. And, you know, again, this is one of the reasons why we have in Neos. We'll also summon Leviathan Dragon to do as much damage as possible to the boss. And this is one of the reasons why we have in Neos, because if we do not break those cocoons, we're not going to be able to summon the Moth cards in order to do all the damage, and Neos is basically the best kind of alternative for that. But as you can imagine, if I had summoned Neos on the right, this turn both me and Duel 3 would have put down a Great Moth, which would have gone up to 5,600, 6,600 with Leviathan Dragon, and we would have done significantly more damage to the boss. Ultimately, it didn't matter too much in this duel, but I think this is something that could matter, so it's just something to take into account too. Don't be afraid to sacrifice your Neos if you need to. And so here I'm just using my rod on one of the monsters, which is going to get an assist heal. Because this Moth does a lot of damage, 2,500 a turn. So it is very, very difficult to survive against this boss for long periods of time. Not to mention, the monster it transforms into a cocoon is going to do 900 to you. So in all likelihood, this boss is going to do 3,400 damage to you per turn. That is a lot if you do not kill it fast. Fortunately, if you are taking out the cocoons, you should be able to defeat this boss within 2 rounds of attacking. If you're not taking out the cocoons, it might get a little tough. You might go 3 rounds, but hopefully you'll still be able to sort of get it down in 3 rounds before it can do too much damage to you. So there we go, we stunned the boss. Now I'm going to summon Neos again. Now, I think it's important on these rounds as well. If you have any assist heal monsters, if you have any other monsters, I think it's important to actually put monsters down on both sides if you have them on this round. If you think you're going to go to the next, to basically, you know, the next round, because this is a good chance to get your monsters down the lane to basically hopefully heal up for the next round. If you think the boss is going to go long enough to do another 2,500 damage to you. So depending on how much health the boss has and how much you think you can do to it, in fact, regardless, I would just put monsters down on both sides, get them as close to doing assist heals as possible, and hopefully you can get the boss down in the next turn or two. And I do apologise for the lack of sound here. So, as you can see, we got the boss down to 4,200. Had I sacrificed my Neos on that previous turn, and got, you know, both me and Duelist 3 got out a Great Moth, we might have actually gotten the boss down to 0 in that one turn. But fortunately, 4,200 is not too bad. That will just be a single Neos to finish it up. Now, I know I didn't draw Trickstar Holy Angel in this, but one thing to note about cards like Leviathan Dragon and Trickstar Holy Angel is because they have 0 defense, they are susceptible to the boss's skill, which will turn, when he becomes a Great Moth, he will turn the lowest defense monster you have into a cocoon that will do 900 damage to you when it dies, just like it's just done there. So just be wary about using Trickstar Holy Angel and Leviathan Dragon after the Cocoon of Evolution. They are great cards to have when before the Cocoon is turned into a Great Moth, but after it's turned into a Great Moth, they are not so great to use. And then we have it. That is the level 15 event raid for the Great Moth completed. This is actually, as I mentioned before, this is one of the harder raids. Hopefully this guide helps you out. And please let me know in the comments below if you have any trouble or you'd like me to change anything in these guides. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe and like for more content, and I will see you on the ladder.